that. We have another customer story next week for February's integration month that I recommend that you check out. Another one that is semi-logistics related but also tied into our finance month for March. And we have a few more on the calendar as well. But really, if you're a customer on this webcast and you're excited to hear from OCuSOFT, if you have a story to tell, I'd encourage you to reach out to us at that business1@asug.com email address. We'd love to get you the opportunity to share your story with your peers as well, so other customers can learn from your experience. If this is the first time you're hearing about ASUG and OneSource, again, we're really going to have an active year-round community and a curriculum of topics focusing on kind of one central theme or two every month, but there's also going to be many more topics we cover on top of that through our blogs, through our videos and webcasts like these. And there's also a discussion forum where we want to be a place where you can get answers. Our subject matter expert is moderating that and can help point you in the right direction if he can't answer the question himself. But it's also an area we hope that the community can come to kind of extend these discussions beyond today's webcast and to really say, hey, our business is looking at this. What do you guys think about that? So please check us out. In the follow-up to the email that you'll get from attending today's live session, or even if you're watching this recording later on, are a number of links to our community forum where you can find our blogs, where you can check out some of our videos, etc. And again, if you're a customer and you have a story to tell, we really want to give you a platform to share your success, share your lessons learned and best practices with your peers, and to create a culture of customer-to-customer sharing. And again, we're super excited about today's webcast, and with that, I want to presenters. But before I do that, I just want to remind you, for those attending live, this session is being recorded, so it's available on demand if you want to share it with colleagues after the fact, or if you want to go back and review something. We'll also post the slides on our community forum if you want to look at these. And you also have an opportunity to ask your questions throughout the webcast. So you should see a Q&A area where you can put in your questions. Our presenters said they're going to keep an eye on those as they go, and they might answer some as they come in, but we'll also have some time at the end for a Q&A as well. So encourage you to ask your questions, and you'll get the slides and access to this recording after session as well. And with that, like I said, the rest of the time here can go to today's presenters, who I threw up their first slide for you. We have Thomas Mason and George Haynes, a couple of vice presidents from a customer OCuSOFT, and I'll let them tell their story to you. Thomas and George, take it away.
All right, thanks, Danny. So I want to thank ASUG, first of all, for giving us the opportunity to President of Corporate Strategy for OCuSOFT. And I'm joined today by my colleague, George Haynes, who is the Vice President of Supply Chain Operations. Good afternoon, George.
Hey, Thomas. Thanks for introducing me and Danny. I want to say thanks to everybody for having us. I understand that Logistics Month actually was in January, but a big shout out to Danny, SAP, and the ASUG community for allowing us a little extra time to get this in and to be able to do this webcast today. So with that said, I'm going to turn it back to Thomas, and we're going to go a little bit through a little bit of history about who OCuSOFT is and what we do.
All right, thanks, George. So OCuSOFT Inc. is an ophthalmic pharmaceutical company dedicated to providing the highest quality ophthalmic products and customer care with the ultimate goal of improving patients' ocular health, which in turn improves their quality of life. So OCuSOFT Inc. was founded in 1986, and since that time has developed a reputation as one of the most innovative small companies in ophthalmology. Its list of accomplishments include bringing to market the first commercially available eyelid cleanser, creating the first artificial tear in the form of a gel, and the development of a highly viscous topical anesthetic for use in surgical procedures. OCuSOFT Inc. is one of only 14 organizations in the Houston, Texas area to be named by the Houston Chronicle as one of its top workplaces for every year that the Workplace Dynamics has performed these rankings. I think that's important to bring to light too, because one of the things that we're going to talk about as going through this is how we use the team that we have here to implement this project. And I think a lot of times people might think that bringing about change can be a negative thing from around the company. And I can assure you that based on these results, that not only has it been a negative thing, but as you'll see later, it's actually improved our company morale. And these workplace dynamic surveys here are surveys that are sent to employees that gauge their engagement in the company and also their satisfaction with the company. And again, for the past several years, we've actually won this award. In addition, OCuSoft Inc. was also named one of the best and brightest companies by the Houston Business Journal, not only because of our strong company culture and exceptional performance, but also due to participation in various community service endeavors. So I think one of the important things to know about that is that OCuSoft is an ophthalmic company. So as we're going through this, I think it'll be important for you to understand a little background about how we operate. So we sell just about anything that you would find in an eye doctor's office. So we don't sell glasses and we don't sell contacts, but just about everything else from Kleenexes to surgical supplies you can find in our catalog. So we have a number of proprietary products that you can find at retailers as well. But primarily what you're going to see is you're going to see us distributing to wholesalers, retailers, and direct to doctor. And our goal is that when we get an order from a doctor, our goal is always to have that order out shipped the same day. And as we go through this process, it's important to keep that fact in mind, and also to keep in mind that almost all of our products are tracked by lot number. So we're using batches in the SAP system, and that's a requirement of the FDA, and you'll understand why that's important as we go through the talk here.
Now, as we get started and we kind of move into the webcast here, I wanted to start by sort of giving a roadmap and letting everyone know what we're going to be discussing today. And so really there were three things that we're going to be talking about on this webcast. The first was the challenge. What was the challenge that OCuSoft Inc. was facing, our strategy for improvement, our results, and then finally we'll spend a little time showing some of the tools that we've developed here at OCuSoft. And before I get too far, I do want to just reiterate what Danny said. We would like this to be interactive, so please, if you guys have any questions as we go through these three areas, feel free to put it in the chat. We'll take a look at it, and we'll try and answer them as best we can at the time that you ask. So first thing, the challenge. Basically, we had a sort of antiquated warehouse distribution system or process, and it was becoming outpaced. It was becoming unuseful based on the amount of sales growth that we had. So our company over the last few years has been in the midst of a tremendous boom in terms of sales, which is always a good thing, but it does bring about some of its own challenges. And in our case, it was that we were having difficulty processing all of the orders that were coming in. And what we found out later on was that much of this difficulty was caused by a reliance on several manual processes. So we'll spend some time talking about those processes and what caused the challenge. And then after that, we're going to move into what our strategy was for improvement. And basically just a synopsis of that is we decided to completely overhaul the current process with an emphasis on creating a system that would get rid of all of the specialist positions, all of the bottlenecks, and would really operate on a distributive workflow. And then finally, at the end of our presentation today, we're going to spend a little bit of time just talking about the results. But just to give you guys a quick preview, I mean, basically what happened was in an 8-hour workday, we were able to reduce the amount of time that it took to process orders by 10 times. And then we were also able to improve our accuracy percentage to 99. We're running at an order accuracy percentage of 99.8%. So now as we move into some of the challenges or problems, we're going to take a little bit of time just to talk about our previous logistics process. And so you guys may be familiar if you watch any TV or see The Prophet. This guy he calls it the 3 Ps: people, product, process. And that's sort of the hallmarks of a successful operation or organization. In our case, we had 3 Ps as well: the printer, the puller, and the packers. But unfortunately, they weren't as productive for us as some of the things that the guy on CNBC does. So in essence, the previous logistics process was focused on specialist positions. And in this process, we'll start with the printer. So all of the sales orders, every sales order that's generated from the field sales reps, from our inside sales reps, anywhere in the company, all of these sales orders were funneled to one person, and that person was known as the printer. And this person operated on a schedule, so they would print orders every 30 minutes. And after they printed those orders, it would be their job to sort them into 3 different baskets, and then they would hand them off to another specialist position known as the puller. And so we had 3 pullers, and the 3 pullers would go to these 3 separate baskets that the printer had sorted. And basically, it was their responsibility to go navigate the warehouse and collect all of the items on the order, and they would put it into a tray and then place it onto a cart. And then once they had stacked up as many orders as the printer had printed for them, they would move that cart to the packing station. And so the packing station was where the orders would be, where all the order information would be entered into SAP and then processed through our shipping management software, which in our case we were using FedEx. So right away in that process, you can see there's 3 bottlenecks in the system. So the first thing is every order is coming to one person, the printer. And if that person is not here or is feeling sick or just having some difficulty, it's very easy for us to lose efficiency in that one spot because we're dependent on one individual. The same thing is kind of true for the pullers. So you have 3 pullers. And in essence, if one of the pullers is out, that's a 33% drop in production. If 2 of them are out, it's 66%. If some of them are moving slow. So by depending on those 3 specialists, we were introducing an inefficiency into our process. And then finally, with the packers, there were 5 packers, so we weren't as dependent on any one of them, even though still one being out would be a 20% drop in production. But the other issue is that as we began to process these orders, there was a significant lag in the system. So what would happen is early in the day, the packers wouldn't have anything to do because the printer hadn't printed and the pullers hadn't pulled. And then late in the day, the packers would be overwhelmed with work because all of the order prints had been done, all of the orders had been dropped off, and they would have 15 or 20 orders sitting on their station being prepared. The other difficulty there is simultaneous processing introduced the opportunity for inaccuracy, introduced the opportunity for error in the system.
Absolutely. You know, and I think that that's an important distinction to keep in mind, George, is that, the more hands that we have in the cookie jar, the more problems that we were coming up with. And another big problem for us was just the time that it was taking. So when we first started monitoring this, we were going down, and as George said, what was happening is that we were getting more and more orders. So we were finding ourselves staying, 30 minutes to an hour over every single day with everybody working 100% of the day. And so, we didn't feel like there was a lack in our people. We felt like the people were doing exactly what they were supposed to be doing in this particular procedure, but they were still having to stay over a little bit. And the other problem that we saw was, and just that time that it took was about 67 minutes when we first started looking at this. Right. So, honestly, I think we can all say that it doesn't take that long to process an order. But it took that long from the time that order was released until the time that it was actually packed and shipped, because again, there was just so many bottlenecks here. And the problem is you've pulled stuff out of inventory in the system, and it's kind of sitting here in limbo. And along those lines, I'd like to talk about the technical process that we were using at that time. So at that time, we were using the native pick and pack manager in SAP, and when George saying that they're printing, that's what we're talking about. So they're going into the pick and pack manager, they're finding orders to be released, they're releasing those orders to a piece of paper. Now, we weren't completely low tech back then. We did have we had some Windows CE devices with some software on there that we had written in-house. And basically, as I said earlier, all of our products were lot managed. So what they would do is they print this pick list out. That pick list would have a barcode on it. They'd use that Windows CE scan gun. They'd scan it. It would get the order, bring it into the system, and then they'd go to and at this time we weren't even bin managed, so they'd go to a location. They'd say, okay, I'm going to scan out this many pieces of it. The challenge with that is the challenge that I think you run into with a lot of Windows CE devices is a lot of times you won't process this stuff in real time. So you're going to find systems and other processes where you're going to take that scan and you're going to write it off to a file somewhere, and then you're going to synchronize it with SAP later. And that's what we were doing. So we were taking and we'd scan this stuff, and it would write to a little file, and then they would go into the packing station and they would basically import in that lot number information and process it. And that process worked, but just the whole process in general from a technical standpoint and from the process standpoint was just a little bit slower than it actually needed to be.
So with all that said, we basically narrowed down the primary issues to the following 3. So as we're looking at our system, we realized the first issue is the use of specialists. These specialist positions were resulting in significant decreases in productivity, and so that had to be addressed. The second issue was an inability to scale. So we had, like Thomas mentioned, we had the people, we felt like they were following the procedure, but just the increased order volume and the way that we were doing things didn't allow us to accommodate the sales growth that we needed to have as a company. And so we had to address that. And then finally, and the last thing, was the substantial opportunity for error. And this is one of the things that in our company and our organizations, we really consider our warehouse department to be a support system for the promises that our other departments are making. And so if you think about like our sales organization, inside or outside sales, when they make a sale and they tell a customer that the product is going to arrive at such and such a day, they're not actually physically going into the warehouse and grabbing that product or packing it in a box or putting the label on and making sure that those things happen. In essence, they're turning that over to us. And so we then become entrusted with this promise that they've made to our customers. And the fact that if we were having any issues in processing that according to the customer's needs, those absolutely had to be addressed because it's critical not only to our ability to just ship orders, but it's critical to our customer acquisition endeavors. We had to maintain our reputation and make sure that we were upholding the promises and obligations that we have to our customers. And so now that we've outlined the key issues, we're going to take a little bit of time, and this will probably be where the bulk of our time is spent today, just talking about what ultimately our strategy for improvement was and how we came to it. So the first thing, and actually I'll be quite honest, we initially thought we were just going to try and find a warehouse management system that would allow us to address the key issues I just talked about. So we wanted visibility into each step in the process, the printing, the pulling, the packing. We wanted to be able to speed that process along. We wanted to be able to measure various aspects of it. And we looked very hard, and we were unable to find a system that was able to either meet our needs or that was an install that would work within the time frame that we were dealing with. And so ultimately, we made the decision to develop the warehouse management system ourselves. And I'll let Thomas had a great impact on that, so I'll let him speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, so and just a little bit of background on me. So I am the VP of Corporate Strategy today, but I haven't always been. As a matter of fact, I came to OCuSOFT as the IT manager years ago. And so I'm very familiar with this process and was involved in getting all of the software out here. And as George alluded to, we've looked a lot, and there's lots of good WMS systems out there. But for our sake, we just found that there was just pieces that were lacking. And we'll get into some of the things that we've added that we felt were lacking in other systems. But you know, the biggest thing for us is we didn't want to be tied to any specific scan gun or anything like that. So the first thing that we did is we made the decision that whatever we did, whether we bought it or made it, it needed to be a web-based platform, something that could work on multiple devices, that would be able to scale well and would be able to be extended as time went on. And as we all know, like, the world is built on the web today, so we keep adding features to that as we go on. So the first thing that we did is we had to identify what we wanted this app to do. And I'll be honest with you, we didn't have everything on day one. We built this system over time. We put in different modules as we went along. And eventually we ended up with a system that basically works on an iPhone. So it runs on an iPhone. There's a sled that the iPhone slides into, and it has a barcode scanner on it. And that allows us to interact with the barcode. But the key for us was we wanted real-time transaction processing. So if there was, for some reason, if I went to a location and I scanned a batch, and for whatever reason, if I couldn't take that batch, I wanted to know about that right away, because there needed to be some corrective action that's taken. And we'll talk about the reasons for that as we go on here. But those were the big things for us. And so we went through that. We created this application. We bought the iPhones, and we started implementing this project.
And so after we kind of identified what we wanted in the system, and we made the decision that we were going to actually do it ourselves, that gave us the opportunity to really make some customizations. And one of the first things that we decided we were going to customize was we were going to get rid of the specialist position. So you heard me talk earlier a little bit about, you know, what would happen if a puller was out, or if someone was moving slower than they normally would, or than what's average for a person. And so when we talked about, I mentioned distributive workflows previously. And so we had kind of, in this process, also made the decision that we weren't going to add headcount. We weren't going to just go out and get more people to handle each one of these tasks, that we needed to find a way to provide the people with the opportunity to be more productive. And so what that entailed was, rather than having all the sales funnel to the printer, and then having the printer subdivided or subsetted into 3 stacks for the pullers, and then having the pullers take all of their orders and send them to the packers, what we decided to do is we decided to see what would happen if we gave each individual the ability to print, to pull, and to pack their own orders. What would that do to our process? Now, Thomas mentioned before the process, or the need for real-time order processing. So we didn't have time, we didn't want to take the time to have to synchronize or do something else with another system. And so basically what we were able to do is we made that a hallmark of step 2 of our plan. We had to come up with a way that would allow us to eliminate the specialist positions, provide everyone with the real-time order processing that we were looking for.
You know, and I think one important thing to bring up right here is we're talking about the implementation phase, if you will, and not just the implementation, but the development phase of this project. I think one of the things that we did that I feel like we got right on this project is communicating from the beginning what the plan is. So we didn't just create all these new processes, create this new application, and then just drop it on the warehouse. This was a long process for this. There was a lot of demonstrations. In fact, we have monthly meetings where we'll have the entire company in our auditorium here, and we review things. And we would demo the app. We would say, like, hey, here's what we're doing. What do you guys think? And we would get feedback, honestly. And there were occasions, as a matter of fact, George and I both personally went down to the warehouse and were picking and packing orders and going through the process. And so, you know, it was important to us to get buy-in. And I will tell you that is a super important part of this, is getting the buy-in from the employees, because one of the things that we learned is, having gone down there, we would work with people and they would say, hey, but did you know that this retailer has this special requirement, or this one has this special requirement? And honestly, for us as executives, as we're going through this process, we didn't know that. I did not know that it took so much longer to do XYZ customer versus this customer. But since we got that feedback on the front end, we could implement changes that would help adjust that as we were moving forward.
Right. And I'll say this. I think what Thomas was talking about was probably the most important part of our getting a successful implementation here, is communicating along the way how an individual's job contributes to the success of the whole, and doing that early. It's much easier to get buy-in early on than it is to get it after everything has changed. And so by being able to facilitate discussions and talk with people on a micro level early in the process, when we talk about changing 1 or 2 things as opposed to just delivering a system that's changed every single thing at the end, made all the difference in the world. Now, after step 2, which was sort of picking out these specialist positions, the third thing that we decided we needed to have was an inspection. We needed to implement an order inspection process, which could be used to measure order accuracy. And this is something that we didn't have before. And so this was quite a bit of a challenge for us. But really it provides insight. And this is something that you'll hear us talk about a little bit later. But if we're going to be setting out goals, it's critically important that we're able to effectively measure what it is that we're asking. And so if you heard me say earlier that it's our position, it's our feeling that we're in the business of upholding promises that are made by our sales department to our customers. And so if we're not, those promises come down to 2 things that customers want: on-time delivery and accurate order fulfillment. And so if those are the 2 things that we're pushing to our logistics network, to our supply chain, to our warehouse team, then we have to be able to measure that, and we have to be able to report on that effectively. And the order inspection process was one where we didn't have before.
Yeah, that's right, George. And I think that's very important. As you're moving through this project, you know, it's important to know what does success look like, right? So now we've implemented these programs, we've done these things. What does success look like? How do I know if I've done the right thing here? And one of the things the 2 things that we found, as you said, was on-time delivery and accurate order fulfillment. So at the time, we didn't have really a way to measure order accuracy. Now, we had a way to go in and we could say, how many returns did you have, how many customer complaints you had. But the problem with that is when you're looking at that, you're really looking at a result. By the time those things happen, it's too late. The problem's already occurred. So what we needed is we needed a way to measure it on the front end. And so what we had come up with was an order inspection process, which, again, I think one of the themes that you'll see here is the things that we're talking about that we implemented, these aren't groundbreaking things that are just super complicated to implement, but they're things that we had to put a little bit of thought into. So what we came up with is we said, well, what we need is a way to score orders after they've been completed. So we didn't want to do it in the process. I wanted you to put your best foot forward. So you go and you say, hey, this is done. And we needed a way to go and have an inspector say, take a box off the pallet, open the box up, and this needed to be random, it needed to be anonymous on that side, where they could take a box off and score that box. And so quite simply what we did is, as part of the web app, we made an interface on there where an inspector would go over to a pallet, they would type in an invoice number that's clearly labeled there on the FedEx label, and then they would score the product. So and basically all they had is they just had a series of check boxes that they would go down through. So they would say, are all the items in the box? Check. Are the heavy items on bottom? Check. If there's an aerosol can in here, is the warning label with it? Check. And then we would use that to formulate a score. And one of the things we'll talk about later is how we can drive that accuracy through the use of dashboards and other things. The other piece that we needed is half of it is accurate order fulfillment, the other time is on-time delivery. So again, we can gauge when a person orders versus when they got it delivered, and that's fine, but what we're looking at here is results. So the biggest driving factor that we were trying to do in this project is we wanted to look at the value chain activities. So we wanted to know, we didn't want to look at the results, we wanted to look at what are the activities that contribute to those results, and let's guide those activities so that we can ensure the results later on. Instead of just retroactively looking at results and then going and changing, we wanted to be able to see things in real time. And one of the things that we found to measure that was how long did it take you to process an order. So you heard us say earlier that our original processing time was 67 minutes, and that's true. When we first started this, that's what we were measuring. We went in and we said, okay, we need a benchmark. How long does it take us to process an order now? And then we wanted to know, moving forward, how long does it take us to process orders now? And the way that we had to do that is, as I'm sure you guys know, Business One does have a doc time in all of the marketing documents, to my knowledge. There was not a doc time in the pick list document itself, because really what we were measuring for processing time is how long is it between when you release the pick list to when it actually is out the door and delivered. Well, not delivered in the sense that it was delivered to the customer, but a delivery was made in SAP. So the way that we did that is we implemented that through the transaction notification, which is a stored procedure in SAP, and said every time you create a pick list, I want you to take the current system time and write it to this database. And then when you finally created the delivery, we would take the delta between those two numbers. That would be our processing time, and we would write that to a database. And then later on, as I said, we'll talk about how we use that information to coach and move forward.
And so it's funny that you bring up the coaching part of it, Thomas, because this is the part where typically people get really bored, right? Oh, you're going to tell me I got to coach and I've got to do this, and that takes so much time. But I will say, once again, this is one of the most critical parts of the process for us. And so part of the program that we designed was we needed to have a way to implement a coaching system to solicit two things. We wanted to both get employee feedback and we wanted to drive their engagement. But the other thing that we wanted to do is we wanted to use our coaching system as a means for process improvement. And so I hear you when you say, oh, the coaching is too much, it's too long, it's too involved. We have 40 people working in our warehouse, and so you can imagine how that time would stack on our managers in that group if they were spending 30 minutes with each employee, and that's a significant drop in productivity. But it is important that we have this communication, and I think our engagement scores and our ranking in the top workplaces would indicate that we have a strong company and corporate culture here at OCuSOFT, and one of the reasons is that we make our coaching process very simple. We do it regularly, but it only involves 3 questions. So the first question is, what's going well? What's working for you? And this question is intended to allow the employee to provide insight to us about the things that they're doing that are going well. It also gives them an opportunity to brag a little bit, and it helps them to feel more comfortable with the conversation. The second question is well, what are the improvements? What types of things do we need to change? What's preventing you from doing the best job that you could? So that's the second question. And in essence, what we're getting at right there is a lot of times those things can be behavioral, but they also can be process-driven. And so we want to know about those things as well. And then what we end up doing is we say, okay, well, what can we do? What's going to be our commitment to fixing this? And so those three questions, what went well, what are our opportunities, and what's our commitment? Those three things encompass the entire coaching process here at OCuSOFT. But they fit into a larger circle, which allows us to basically train. So we train on the process as we believe it ought to be working. Then we coach. In that coaching process, we get feedback. We learn about new things, and then we commit to making improvements. And then those process improvements become the new thing that we train on. And then we coach again, or we train again, and then we coach, and then we get the process improvement, and then we train and coach process improvement. And so that circle kind of revolves and goes around. And so you heard Thomas say earlier that we initially started off at a 67-minute order processing time. We got a bump early on, right when we implemented it, day one, to probably about 10 minutes. And then through this process, through this coaching, through this process improvement, and then training, we've slowly whittled it down to 4 minutes in the time since then. So coaching is critical, and not just as a means for employee engagement, which it is fantastic at. It's also a means for stimulating and facilitating process improvement. So that was critical for us to have in the program.
And I want to reiterate what George is saying here, and I don't want to beat the drum too much here, but the coaching and the training aspects of this are some of the most important things that you can do here. And I think George kind of glossed over that, but that's an extreme improvement to go from a 67 minutes down to 4 minutes. As George said, the program itself, when we changed these processes and we put this application in place, day one, we went from 67 minutes down to 10 minutes. And that's a huge improvement, and it probably speaks to, the application working well and the processes being the right processes. But beyond that, what got us from 10 minutes down to 4 minutes was coaching and training. And I can't stress enough how important that is to be sure that the employees have the resources to be coached and to be trained. And frankly, we're sitting here on an ASUG call. There's tons of training information on ASUG. You can go on, you can look up SAP training, other things like that. And I would highly encourage you to do that, because the more engaged your employees are in the particular project or process that you're going through, the more success you're going to have. And I will tell you today, I've seen that number go down to 3 minutes before. And when you think about that, like if we go from such a high processing to such a low processing time, that's a huge improvement for us as a company.
Right. And I think, actually, Thomas, let's pause here for a second. We've got a question from John Pinto, who says, do you have your own development team, or did you hire a consultant to write your software changes?
That's a good question. So we actually, we developed, when we first released the app, version 1 of this app, we had written ourselves. So we have, myself, I worked on a lot of the code. George here helped me with a lot of the SQL code. So we wrote most of that code ourselves. But I will say today, and we'll get into this a little bit later, today we actually do have some help from our partner as well. And that's really what's made this app go from where it was when we first launched to where it is today. And we'll get into that a little bit later.
Okay, great. I just want to pick up again on what, before we move on to step 5 here, I do want to just pick up a little bit more on what Thomas was talking about in terms of what the coaching and the movement from a 67-minute processing time down to a 4-minute processing time has done for our organization. So in a lot of ways, you would think, wow, we've got too many people, or we've got some other things going on. But what it allowed us to do, we talked a little bit about business transformation, and that single process has done a lot that we'll get into in a couple of slides. But I want to point that out, that just because we've taken this drop in processing time doesn't mean that we've allowed slack to enter into the system. There are other ways to repurpose people and have them do things that are very helpful for the organization.
Well, and again, we will get into that later, but it was never our intention to reduce things that much. And what we'll talk about in a little bit is that by creating that Slack, we've actually opened up a lot of other opportunities for us as an organization. Right. You know, one of the things I think is important to talk about when we're talking about coaching, you keep hearing us talk about performance dashboards. I'm going to let George talk a little bit about the dashboards that we use, because I think this is also a critical part to the execution of this particular plan.
Yeah, and so when we talk about dashboards, typically there's two types of dashboards that you'll have in an organization. There's either private dashboards that are typically used by executives or other people running the departments, and then there are public dashboards. In our case, we wanted to, and we made the decision to absolutely use public dashboards. And that decision was made primarily because we were having, once we began to talk to people about this, once the employees were engaged about where we were going, and they wanted to know what was happening, and the big question became, well, how do we know if we're having a good day? What does a good day look like? What does that mean? How do we know? And so we honed in on a couple of key performance indicators in our warehouse, in our logistics team. Those indicators are the same ones that you heard us talk about before: order processing time and accuracy. But we did it in the form of a group metric, and we ran that metric out versus a 90-day average. And so we put them up on, we have rather large, which fortunately you can get large, big screen, flat screen TVs very inexpensively nowadays. But we put these up on the walls in our warehouse, and at a glance, anyone can tell whether or not we're having a good day, if our accuracy is up to date, if our order processing time is up to date. And they all, because of the coaching process, are able to understand what it means if for some reason our order processing time went from 4 minutes to 8 minutes, or we were having a day where it was at 10 minutes. We would be able to identify that there's an issue immediately, and we wouldn't have to wait till the end of the day to run a report or to do anything like that.
You know, and I think, George, an important thing about that is yes, having it real time is what's really important to us, because I can remember an occasion when we first started with the system. You know, we had gotten down to a low processing time. I think at that time we were running about 6 minutes an order or something like that. And what we found is a couple days we would be looking at these, and these are web-based dashboards, this particular one at least. And we would bring it up here upstairs, and George and I were looking at it. We're like, wow, why is the processing time so high today? And so we'd go down there and say, hey, you know, what's going on? Why is the processing time so high today? And come to find out that this was one of those occasions where a particular customer had a unique requirement that was causing the processing time to go much higher. And in that instance, we said, well, how many of these people are there? And then we found out that that was a real problem, you know, that this particular customer was doing something strange that was causing our processing time to come up. So in essence, what that means is for us to process that order, it cost us more money as a company. And so we were actually able to go in and correct that process as well. And that's why it's really important to have live dashboards where you can see the data on a regular basis and have conversations with the employees to make improvements.
Now, the last step in the process, step 6, is one that really comes naturally out of driving, you know, performance in the way that we have. So we talked to our employees about what's going on. We developed the standards and got the metrics necessary for everyone to understand what a good job looks like. We coached them on how to become better. We've displayed this information publicly. So the very last step in the process was we wanted to make sure that people who had bought into this process, people that had committed themselves to ensuring that OCuSOFT as an organization became better, were able to share in the process. And so the last step was to develop a bonus plan that rewards employee performance based strictly on key performance indicators. So not based on whether or not we like them or any of those things, but based strictly on providing exceptional performance in key areas.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and I think one of the interesting things about this, too, is a lot of times when you're bringing up bonuses or things like that, sometimes people say, well, you know, there's going to be pushback, and sometimes there are. You say, well, why do you need a bonus plan down here? Why do we need to pay people for doing their job? But I think if you go through a process like this, where you can specifically find the metrics and you can prove basically how much money you're going to be saving, it's easier to sell that up the chain. So you can go and say, look, these processes are going to improve. If we meet these numbers, our company will save X amount of dollars, and all I'm recommending is that we share the pie a little bit with the people who are driving that increased efficiencies. But again, it comes down to going through the process and finding the important metric and finding the value chain activities that contribute to this in the first place.
Okay, so
There we go.
Okay. Yeah, and so now that that's done, and we've done a lot of talking on this call, I'm sure you guys are rather interested in knowing how this turned out. So, in essence, the outcomes were basically we did accomplish a more efficient order processing time. Since the transformation, the processing time has dropped by about 94%, from 67 minutes to right now an average of 4 minutes. And what's important to realize is that that's only one half of the keys that we had come up with. So we were able to drop that order processing time while maintaining an accuracy percentage of 99.8%. And so that's really been critical for us, and I think one of the big wins from this particular program.
Yeah, absolutely. So another thing that we've gotten to is, as George alluded to earlier, when we were going through this process, initially we had some overtime that we were dealing with, and we were also, so we had some overtime we were dealing with, and now that we've gone through this process, we've been able to increase our speed so much that what we were finding is that we were really processing orders in real time by about noon, whereas before we were staying late. Now we were sometimes finishing early. And so that created an issue, and we're going to talk about how we dealt with that. But also another thing that happened, I think this is a funny story, is we actually, after we implemented this and we started getting that time down slower and slower, we actually got a call from our customer service, and they said, hey, you guys are processing orders too fast. And we said, what are you talking about? And they said, well, what happens is a customer calls in, they make an order, they want to call back like 10 minutes later and update their order, and the order's already processed. It's already on the pallet. And we're like, well, I don't see why that's a problem, but, we put some things in place to fix that. But one of the things that we were finding is like, the thing is we've gotten so efficient out here that now we have some people that are almost standing around at the end of the day. And so, and rather than thinking, oh, we need less people, we said, what we need is we need more orders. And so as a consequence of this project, we have actually been able to go out to some people in our industry and, who had started up some new business ventures and needed somebody to provide third-party logistics for them. And because of the efficiencies that we had gained in our warehouse, we were more than able to take on that capacity. And as a matter of fact, as we keep improving this process, we're able to take on more of those sort of arrangements and take on more capacity in our warehouse. Another thing that came from this is we had been developing this app for a lot of years, and it was a good app, I think. I mean, it had done everything that we needed and obviously caused us to have better processing time. So I had gotten the idea to contact our SAP partner, who's BlueOcean Systems, and I asked them, I said, we really got a lot of use out of this application. Do you think other people would be interested in this as well? And they said, yeah, absolutely. So we've been working with BlueOcean Systems now for a while, and thanks to their help and their development team, we've actually been able to go out and make this app even better and make it production ready. So as of today, they are marketing this app as it's called BlueOceanScan. It is probably a little bit better version than even what we're running. So that is available out there, but that's been an additional source of revenue for OCuSOFT, and it's been highly beneficial. But probably, one of the most important things that I think you can take from all of this is around employee engagement. So since the implementation, the engagement score in the warehouse has improved by 16% over the last year, which makes it the most rapidly improving department in the entire organization. And for us, that is huge. Prior to going through this process, that simply wasn't the case. We were staying late, which, people like overtime money, but people don't like overtime work a lot of times. And so as a consequence, I think morale was not the greatest that it could be. But I think through the efforts of the coaching, the training, implementing the new app, going through this, that we've actually been able to increase the morale out there. And I'll let George speak to that since that's his team out there.
Yeah, we've talked a lot so far about just technology and some of the technological things that we're able to do and visibility, but really the most important thing, none of this matters. A great app doesn't matter if the people who are using it aren't on board with what it is that you're trying to accomplish. And so the most important thing is that the people on your team, the people in your company, they believe in what it is that you're trying to accomplish. And so oftentimes I think one of the obstacles to programs like this or to coaching or to public dashboards is fear that somehow these things are going to that these things are going to hurt employee engagement or hurt employee morale. Everybody sees my performance, and that's going to hurt. Or there's a public dashboard where my name is up, or they're constantly watching me. Those sorts of feelings. But I think what we're trying to demonstrate and trying to tell everyone is that getting this information from SAP, sharing it with your employees, and having open, honest coaching conversations where the point is not to catch someone doing something wrong, but really just strictly to improve the process, is what drives employee engagement. And you can have both. You can have a robust system. You can have engaged employees. You can have, really good customer service scores and net promoter scores and all of these things. But it always comes down to the people that you have on your team and how you manage them.
Yeah, again, I can't stress enough how important coaching and training are. So find the resources that your people need to be trained up appropriately. Be sure that you implement some sort of program for coaching, because that's going to be very important.
Okay, so now I think it's probably, we're coming to the end of our time here, but I do want to take just a few minutes and just show you some of the dashboards. And so the first ones you'll see here, these are very basic. The first dashboard that you're looking at is in essence the group metric. Now, before anybody looks at this and says anything, we took this screenshot, several months ago, so please forgive me for an accuracy score at that time of 99.57 and a processing time of 5 minutes. But in essence, what you're looking at, the left-hand side is right now, today, at the time that the report is run. So this is real-time data. It updates every time a line is processed, every time an order is scored. And what you'll see there is it's compared to the right side of the screen. So in our particular apps, what we look for is we want to compare not to some benchmarked goal that we've set up. We compare to an average. And the reason we use an average, in this case it's a 90-day average, is because it scales. So as our business improves, then our performance has to improve to get over the mark. And I'll let Thomas speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, so it's really important, I think, that you have a benchmark that you can work on. But one of the things that we feel is important is having a moving benchmark, right? Like we don't want to have a yearly goal. We want to be constantly improving. And one of the easiest ways to get to that is by using a 90-day average as your benchmark. So as you improve, that average will improve. As an example, lines processed, we have seen that number keep climbing as we're taking on more and more business. And so what we can see is as the average moves, so does the benchmark and so does the goal that we're working towards.
So the next dashboard that you'll see, and we know this one's a little bit smaller, it has individual employee names on it and some other things, but this gives you an idea of just kind of what they look like. This is the individual portion of the logistics dashboard. And so what we have here is each employee listed, their average this month for lines processed per day, and then also their accuracy percentage. And then that's compared against some of the averages that we talked about. And on the right-hand side, you see some of the gauge graphics that we use to track our inspections and other things.
Well, and I think one thing that's interesting to take from this, so we're looking at two dashboards here. And one of these is written in HTML that's running on a web page. The other one is written in R that's running on a Shiny server here. And the thing is, they don't have to be complicated. It doesn't really matter what system you're using to make these. So, George wrote some of these, I wrote some of these, and we weren't experts when we started doing this, but we've learned how to do it, and I certainly would encourage you guys to do the same thing, that you absolutely can do these sort of things. And the dashboards are just really important when you're driving efficiency in there, but it only works if you tie it to the coaching, tie it to the training. All right, so
with that, we've come to the end of our presentation. So it looks like we have some questions here. Looks like John is asking, so the average time from the pick being generated to the items being packed and the delivery note created is only 4 minutes?
And that is correct.
That is true.
One thing, John, one thing I want you to realize too is, so it's important to realize that our items are small, right? So typically we're selling most everything that we ship will fit in a box that's about, what would you say, 12 inches by 12 inches?
Yeah.
Yeah. So then that's because we're selling eye care products.
Now, John also mentions that he says it seems unbelievable just for the time it takes to walk the warehouse to pick the products and then to pack them. We'd love to see a video. Okay. So yeah, one of the things that we did, John, with our bin warehouse is we did do some optimization in terms of where we place the bins.
Yeah.
So we use a velocity report, and we place the highest velocity bins closest to the employee workstations, and that's one of the critical ways in which we're able to minimize the amount of travel time.
Yeah, and I think it's important, too, to keep in mind, I think a while back, John was asking about the size of our warehouse. So our warehouse may be rather large, but our quick pull area we keep small. And one of the things that we actually did through this app that we didn't mention in here was we wanted to be sure that we had a mechanism to keep those quick pull areas stocked and counted. So as part of the app, we've developed some cycle count pieces to it, as well as some stocking pieces to it, so that we actually have some inventory control people that are constantly taking products from the bulk warehouse, which is the bigger section of our warehouse, and moving them into the quick pull area. And I would say at any given time, really, I would say probably close to 90% of the orders that people are picking are going to be on a single aisle from start to finish. And then even if you think of the entire quick pull area itself, that area itself is pretty small. Most of our warehouse size is made up in bulk storage. But in order to facilitate something like that, it's really important to keep that flow from the bulk area into the quick pull moving at a regular pace.
Right, and those are the type of things that once we moved down from 67-minute processing time to 4-minute processing time, we were able to repurpose some of the people to be able to do. So, for example, we were able to ensure that those bins stay stocked all the time, so that no one's waiting. They don't have to wait for a transfer in order to pull their product. We also use some of those people to do cycle counting in the downtime, and so we're able to count through our deliverable section 6 times a year. And so we're very, very accurate in terms of our inventory now, and it eliminates the need for corrections or other things that would otherwise slow down the process.
Here's a question. Why or how did you decide to move forward with SAP Business One compared to other WMS, especially SAP Extended Warehouse Management that fits your business requirement? What are the advantages? So, as far as SAP is concerned, in our particular case, it wasn't a decision to move to SAP as far as the WMS was concerned. We already had Business One when we started moving into this particular project. But as far as why did we decide to go with this homegrown application as opposed to one that we could buy, the thing is we really couldn't find one that met all of our requirements at that particular time. So that, we wanted a web-based system. We wanted to be able to make edits as far as edit the HTML. We wanted to be able to have real-time processing. And at the time when we started developing this app, there really just wasn't anything on the market that we had found that could do that.
So it looks like John asked, how many items do you keep in your quick pull area? So we have, I think it's around like 800 or something bins. But that's a relatively, it's kind of, you have to imagine our warehouse. It's a relatively small area, and part of our logic sends the person down the aisle to the farthest point and then basically works them back. Yeah. And so while that may sound like just a ton of items in a particular area, it's not a really large area.
Well, and that's the thing to keep in mind for us. Again, our products are small products. So, a bin for us, like a single location where you'd find a product, might be, what would you say, 6 to 8 inches across. And so when you have a whole long aisle, you can fit a lot of products in that area. Yes. I think we have any other questions. All right.
Well, I guess
we're done here if I don't have any other questions.
Yeah, so this is Danny again. Thank you both. Again, this was really great to hear about your success and about your customer story in general, and appreciate your ability to answer all of the questions that we received. I saw one more just pop in. Looks like more of a comment than a question, so we can take one kind of final call for questions. Again, I mentioned this is being recorded, and you all will receive a follow-up email with a link to access this on demand. Also in that email will be links to where you can find our OneSource community, where you can follow us on LinkedIn or Twitter. We also recently added a Facebook page too, so rather than relying on email, liking or following us on those social media are a good way to stay up to date on other webcasts that are coming up, blogs, and things like that. And again, I just want to appeal to the other customers on the call. If you liked hearing from your peer, from another customer about what they're doing, and if you have a cool story to tell about where you have transformed your business or a recent project or upgrade or implementation that you want to tell us about, please reach out to us at businessone@asug.com so we can schedule you in the rest of our curriculum for 2018. And even if it doesn't fit that curriculum, we want to provide an option for you to share your story with other customers and with our community. Also, any partners on the line, if you have a customer with a cool story to tell, please send it our way as well, or reach out if you want to share your partner expertise within our program. Again, this was a follow-up to Logistics Month. We kind of extended that into February, and I just want to put a plug that from what I can tell based on the customer webcast we have lined up for March, there's some tie into logistics there as well. So if you've been participating in Logistics Month or really liked hearing a logistics-focused customer story, our March one is going to be related to finance, but it's also going to have a logistics tie-in as well, I believe. That's from Gomard Scientific, another Business One customer. And then if you are interested in integration, next week we have a customer story from Heat Transfer Research Inc., and they've been doing some own kind of development on their own and some really cool things with the HANA service layer, and their session next week is about live coding, so I encourage you to register for that as well. And then also every month we'll have a weekly best practices or Ask the Expert session from our subject matter expert, session from SAP. You'll probably hear from partners, but we really want to encourage any customers who have a story to tell that we can be the place to help you out for that, and reach out for information on incentives and benefits of sharing your customer story as well. But otherwise, I didn't see any more questions, Thomas or George, that came in while I was talking there. Just wanted to say thanks again for presenting and for sharing your story. Any final comments or anything that you want to, any parting shots that you want to leave people with?
I would like to say thank you for the opportunity, Danny, and thank everyone on the call for joining us today. We are very happy to be a part of the ASUG community, and looking forward to hearing more stories from other customers.
Absolutely. So thank you all very much for your time.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Again, this will be available on demand pretty much right now, and you should be receiving some follow-up to that. Have a good rest of your day.